The copper sun of Thalassa 9 hung like a molten coin in the hazy sky, casting long shadows across the red dunes that surrounded the research outpost. Established 3 standard years ago, under the fragile Galactic Peace Accord. Outpost. Helios represented humanity's tentative step toward reconciliation with the Evrian people. The outpost's sleek, prefabricated structures stood in stark contrast to the ancient Avrian citadel, half buried in sand just 2 kilometers away. A magnificent structure of iridescent stone that seemed to shift colors with the movement of the twin moons. Dr. Elias Carter stood at the observation deck, his dark eyes fixed on the distant citadel. As the mission's lead xenobiologist, he had dedicated his career to understanding alien physiologies. But the Evrians remained largely a mystery. Their scaled bodies, reminiscent of Earth's long-extinct reptiles, but with an almost crystalline quality, housed biological systems unlike anything in the known galaxy. More frustrating still was their reluctance to engage in any meaningful scientific exchange. Still staring at the Forbidden Palace, Dr. Leona Rivas joined him at the railing, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. As the team's xenopsychologist, she was equally frustrated by their host's reticence. 3 years. Leona, 3 years. And we've had exactly 7 formal meetings with their scientists. 7. Elias ran a hand through his short black hair, streaked prematurely with gray at the temples. We've learned more from observing their public ceremonies than from any official exchange. Leona nodded, her dark eyes sympathetic behind wire-rimmed glasses. The war wounds are still fresh for them. 4 decades isn't long in Avrian terms. Many who fought are still alive. I know, Elias sighed. I just thought science should transcend politics. Knowledge benefits everyone. Not when knowledge was weaponized so recently. Leona's voice softened. The peace accord is holding, but trust? That's going to take generations. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Lieutenant Kara May, the outpost's security chief. Her uniform was impeccable as always, her posture rigid as she approached. Dr. Carter, Dr. Rivas, she nodded curtly. We've received a communication from the Citadel. Queen Sayela will be conducting the seasonal blessing ceremony tomorrow. They've extended an invitation for 3 of our scientists to observe. Elias straightened immediately. That's unprecedented. The blessing ceremony is one of their most sacred traditions. Exactly. Kara's expression remained neutral, but her eyes betrayed concern. Command views this as potentially significant. You'll lead the delegation, Dr. Carter, along with Dr. Rivas and Dr. Abernathy. Xenolinguistics, psychology, and biology, Elias nodded. A logical selection. Just remember, Kara cautioned, this is observation only. The terms of the accord are explicit. No recording devices, no sampling, no direct interaction with the royal family. We understand protocol. Lieutenant. Elias tried to keep the edge from his voice. 5 years in the military before returning to academia had taught him to respect chain of command. But sometimes, the restrictions chafed. I'm sure you do, Doctor. Her tone softened slightly. But I also know your curiosity. It's admirable in a scientist, potentially disastrous in a diplomat. After Kara departed, Leona chuckled. She knows you well. Too well. Elias turned back to the view of the citadel, its spires glowing amber in the setting sun. But this might be our breakthrough, Leona. A chance to see their ceremonies up close rather than through telescopes. Just remember, she cautioned, for Evrians, everything communicates meaning, posture, color changes, scale positioning. One wrong gesture could undo years of diplomatic work. I've studied the protocols. He smiled faintly. I won't cause an interstellar incident. Neither of them could have predicted how wrong he would be. The interior of the Evrian citadel surpassed all expectations. The human delegation passed through massive archways carved from a single piece of luminescent stone, into chambers where light seemed to dance across iridescent walls. Every surface bore intricate patterns, not mere decoration, Elias realized, but historical records etched into the very structure of their home. An Avrian attendant led them through winding corridors. Like all his kind, he moved with fluid grace despite standing nearly 7 feet tall. His scales shifted subtly from deep blue to purple as they walked deeper into the citadel, an involuntary response to changing light conditions that human xenobiologists still struggled to fully understand. They were ushered into a vast circular chamber. Hundreds of Evrians stood in concentric rings around a central dais, their collective scales creating a rippling ocean of color. At the center stood Queen Sayela, instantly recognizable by her crown-like crest of elongated scales that shimmered with all the colors of a nebula. "Magnificent," Leona whispered beside him. Elias could only nod. The queen was both alien and beautiful, her tall, slender form draped in ceremonial metals that complemented rather than covered her royal blue scales. Her elongated face held 4 eyes, 2 large main ones and 2 smaller accessory eyes above them, all the color of burnished gold. But what struck Elias most was her presence. Even without understanding Evrian social cues fully, he could feel the respect she commanded. An attendant positioned the humans at the outermost ring, where they could observe without intruding. Elias noticed young Prince Darren standing at his mother's right hand. Unlike the queen's blue coloration, the prince's scales held a greenish tint, marked with the distinctive patterning of the royal bloodline. The ceremony began with a series of harmonics, sounds produced by specialized chambers in the Avrians' throats, creating music that resonated throughout the hall. The queen moved in precise patterns, her scales catching the light from apertures high in the domed ceiling. As she turned, Elias noticed something unusual. A section of scales along her left side appeared duller. Their crystalline luster diminished. "Dr. Rivas," he whispered, "look at the queen's left flank. Those scales appear damaged." Leona frowned. "You're right. Physical imperfection is highly stigmatized in their culture. For the queen to appear publicly with damaged scales—" "Silence, please." Their Avrian guide's harmonics dropped to a warning tone. "The blessing approaches." The ceremony reached its apex as Queen Sayela raised her arms, causing her scales to fan outward slightly, a display of both vulnerability and strength that Elias recognized from his research. The assembled Evrians responded with a harmonic chorus that made the very air vibrate. And then everything changed in an instant. The first tremor was subtle, a vibration they might have attributed to the ceremony itself. The second shook dust from the ancient ceiling. By the third, panic erupted as chunks of stone began falling from above. "Seismic activity!" Elias shouted as the floor beneath them heaved. "Everyone out!" Chaos engulfed the chamber. Avrians rushed toward exits, their normally ordered movements abandoned in fear. Elias lost sight of Leona and Dr. Abernathy in the crush. He pushed against the tide, instinctively moving toward the center, where he'd last seen the queen. A massive section of the ceiling collapsed, sending deadly shards across the chamber. Screams, both human and Evrian, filled the air. Through swirling dust, Elias spotted Queen Sayela pinned beneath a fallen column, her royal guards struggling to reach her through the debris. Without hesitation, he fought his way to her side. Her golden eyes, all 4, widened at the sight of a human approaching. Up close, he could see that the damaged scales along her side had been further injured, some now cracked completely to reveal raw flesh beneath. "Your Majesty," he said, kneeling beside her. "I'm a doctor. Please, let me help." Another tremor shook the chamber before she could respond. More stones fell, and Elias instinctively threw himself over her, shielding her body with his own. Pain exploded across his back as something struck him, but he maintained his position until the shaking subsided. When he looked up, the queen's eyes were studying him with an unreadable expression. Her scales had shifted to a deeper blue, a color change he couldn't interpret. Behind them, voices shouted in both human and Evrian languages as rescue efforts began. "The chamber is unstable," she said, her voice rich and melodic, despite the universal translator's mechanical overtones. "We must move." "You're injured," Elias countered, assessing the stone pinning her lower body. "We need to be careful." The queen's primary eyes narrowed. "My guards will return momentarily. Your assistance is unnecessary, human." Another tremor answered her, smaller but ominous. More dust and small stones rained down. "With respect, Your Majesty," Elias said firmly, "we don't have time to wait." Without further discussion, he positioned himself at the column and pushed with all his strength. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the stone shifted just enough for the queen to pull herself free. She rose unsteadily, her normally fluid grace compromised by injury. When she took a step, her leg nearly buckled beneath her. "Allow me," Elias said, offering his arm for support. She hesitated, her scales rippling with color, pride warring with practicality. Another small tremor decided the matter. She placed a three-fingered hand on his shoulder, her touch unexpectedly warm through the fabric of his uniform. "The inner sanctum," she said, pointing toward a small archway, partially hidden behind ceremonial draperies. "It lies within the oldest part of the citadel. The foundations are deeper, more stable." Together, they made their way across the chamber, navigating fallen debris. Elias was acutely aware of the weight of the moment, a human physically supporting the Evrian queen, an intimacy unprecedented since the peace accord. He could only imagine how the sight would appear to traditionalists on either side. They passed through the archway, into a narrow corridor, just as another section of the main chamber's ceiling collapsed behind them. The sound of falling stone was quickly muffled as Queen Sayela pressed her palm to a panel, causing a crystalline barrier to seal the entrance. "We are safe here," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious pain. "The sanctum has survived 17 great shakings over 9,000 cycles." The corridor opened into a smaller chamber, clearly private rather than ceremonial. Illumination came from bioluminescent panels that cast a soft blue glow over furnishings that blended Evrian biological architecture with practical function. "Please," she gestured to a curved bench. "Seat yourself." Elias remained standing. "Your injuries need treatment, Your Majesty." "As do yours." Dr. Carter. Her upper eyes focused on something behind him. "Your back bleeds." He became aware of the warm wetness spreading across his shoulder blades. The adrenaline had masked the pain until now. "My injuries are secondary. Those damaged scales, they need attention before infection sets in." A sound emerged from her throat, a harmonic he couldn't interpret. "You presume much knowledge of Evrian physiology." "I presume nothing," he said carefully. "I observe. Those scales were damaged before the ceremony. The earthquake has worsened the condition. The exposed tissue is vulnerable. I'm trained in xenobiology, but I need your guidance to treat you properly." She regarded him for a long moment, her golden eyes unblinking. Finally, she inclined her head slightly. "We have supplies here. I will tend your wounds first. Then you may assist with mine." "Your Majesty." "This is not negotiable. Dr. Carter." Her scales flashed briefly crimson, a warning. "You shielded me with your body. Honor demands reciprocity." Recognizing the cultural significance, Elias nodded. "As you wish." She moved to a recessed panel in the wall, retrieving items from hidden compartments. Her movements were measured, deliberate, masking pain through discipline. She returned with what appeared to be medical supplies, though the designs were unfamiliar. "Remove your upper covering," she instructed. Elias, carefully peeled off his torn uniform jacket and undershirt, wincing as dried blood pulled at the wound. The queen moved behind him, and he felt the strange sensation of her cool fingers examining his injury. "The stone cut deeply, but cleanly," she observed. "No fragments remain in the wound." "That's fortunate," he replied, trying to focus on anything but the novel experience of an Evrian queen tending his injuries. "How bad is the damage to your scales?" A pause in her movements. "Significant. The initial injury occurred 3 lunar cycles ago. These scales were already compromised." "May I ask how it happened?" Her hands resumed their work, applying something cool and slightly numbing to his laceration. "Assassination attempt. Traditionalist faction. They disagreed with my decision to allow human researchers on Thalassa." Elias stiffened. "I wasn't aware." "It was not disclosed." Her voice remained neutral. "Such knowledge would have compromised the peace accord." "And now," he couldn't help asking, "treating a human, won't that further antagonize the traditionalists?" The queen applied what felt like a bandage across his wound. "These are exceptional circumstances. Even tradition bends in the face of necessity." Once she finished, Elias carefully turned to face her. "Thank you, Your Majesty. Now, please allow me to examine your injuries." After a moment's hesitation, she settled onto the curved bench and extended her injured leg. Up close, the damage was worse than Elias had initially assessed. Several scales had been completely torn away, while others hung precariously, exposing the sensitive tissue beneath. "I need to clean the wound," he explained, selecting what appeared to be antiseptic solutions from the supplies she'd gathered. "This may cause discomfort." "Proceed." Her face remained impassive, but as he worked, he noticed subtle changes in her scale coloration, darkening around the edges. A physiological response to pain she couldn't entirely suppress. Working methodically, Elias cleaned debris from the wound, his touch as gentle as possible. The queen remained silent, her breathing the only indication of her discomfort. As he examined the older damaged scales along her side, he noticed their unusual texture. Not merely broken, but somehow altered at a structural level. "These scales," he said quietly, "they're different from the others. The damage pattern is unlike trauma from impact." The queen's eyes flickered, all 4 focusing on his face. "Correct. The weapon was biochemical. It disrupts the crystalline matrix of our scales, preventing regeneration." Elias paused, horrified by the implication. "A weapon specifically designed to target Evrian physiology?" "Yes." Her voice remained steady. "Developed during the war. By humans." The weight of history hung between them for a moment. Elias carefully considered his next words. "I'm sorry for what my species did to yours." "You personally designed this weapon?" Her tone held a hint of something unexpected. Wry humor. "No, of course not." "Then, your apology, while appreciated, is unnecessary." Her scales shifted subtly, blue deepening to violet. "I have found individual guilt for collective actions to be inefficient." As Elias continued treating her wounds, applying regenerative compounds according to her instructions, a comfortable silence developed between them. The distant sounds of rescue operations occasionally filtered through the thick walls, but the sanctum remained a pocket of calm amid chaos. "Do they hurt?" he asked finally, gesturing to the damaged scales that would not regenerate. "The ones affected by the weapon." The question seemed to surprise her. Her main eyes blinked slowly, and a ripple of color, almost like a blush in human terms, passed across her facial scales. "Only when you stare like that," she said, her voice softer than before. The unexpectedly vulnerable response caught Elias off guard. He looked up from his work to find her golden eyes studying him with an expression he couldn't read. Curiosity, perhaps, or reassessment. "I apologize," he said. "Professional interest." I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable. Discomfort is unfamiliar, not unwelcome. She shifted slightly. Few ask direct questions about injury among my kind. Imperfection is private. Among humans, wounds often become stories, Elias offered, especially shared wounds. An interesting perspective. She gestured to a scar on his forearm that he'd nearly forgotten. Like this one. He glanced down, surprised by her observation. Yes, research expedition on Proxima B. Something like your world's sand vipers, but with 4 heads. You were careless? Curious, he smiled faintly. Sometimes they're the same thing. To his surprise, the harmonic that emerged from her throat resembled laughter. Indeed, Dr. Carter, our species may have more commonalities than differences. Their conversation was interrupted by a sudden commotion outside the sealed entrance. Voices called out, both human and Evrian, with increasing urgency. Queen Sayela pressed a control panel, and the barrier became transparent while remaining sealed. On the other side stood Prince Darren with several royal guards, alongside Lieutenant Kara May and a security team from the human outpost. The expressions on both sides shifted from relief to shock as they registered the scene. The Evrian queen and human scientist sitting close together, both partially undressed for medical treatment, surrounded by scattered supplies. "Mother!" Prince Darren's scales flashed alarmed orange. "Are you harmed?" Simultaneously, Kara stepped forward, her hand moving instinctively toward her sidearm. "Dr. Carter, are you being held against your will?" The absurdity of both questions, each side assuming the worst of the other, struck Elias forcefully. Before he could respond, Queen Sayela rose to her full height, her bearing regal despite her injuries. "Lower your weapons, all of you," she commanded, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that even the humans could feel reverberating in their chests. "Dr. Carter saved my life at risk to his own. He has provided medical assistance with honor and respect." Kara's hand moved away from her weapon, but her expression remained suspicious. "We've been searching for hours, sir. The entire eastern section of the Citadel has collapsed." "Hours?" Elias glanced at his chronometer, surprised to find that nearly 5 standard hours had passed since the earthquake. Prince Darren pressed his palm against the barrier. "Mother, the Council of Elders has convened an emergency session. They demand your presence to address the crisis. And to verify your well-being," added one of the guards, his scales shifting nervously as he glanced at Elias. Queen Sayela's expression hardened. "I understand their concern." She turned to Elias. "It seems our time in sanctuary has ended. Dr. Carter." He nodded, reaching for his torn shirt. "Of course, Your Majesty." She moved to the control panel but paused before opening the barrier. "Dr. Carter, what transpired here? The medical assistance, our conversation. It would be best if such details remained private." "I understand." He recognized the political realities at play. Medical confidentiality applies across species. Her upper eyes crinkled slightly, the Evrian equivalent of a smile. "Indeed." The barrier dissolved, and immediately both parties surged forward. Prince Darren moved protectively to his mother's side, while Kara positioned herself between Elias and the Evrian guards. "Dr. Carter requires medical attention," the Queen announced, her tone brooking no argument. "I expect your facility will provide it with the same care he showed me." "Of course, Your Majesty," Kara replied stiffly. "We have medics standing by." As they prepared to part ways, Queen Sayela caught Elias's gaze one final time. Something passed between them, an understanding, perhaps, or the beginning of one. Then the moment ended, as each was swept away by their respective entourages, back to their separate worlds. Neither suspected how quickly those worlds would collide again. Absolutely not. Admiral Reeves's holographic projection loomed large in the outpost's communication center, his weathered face set in familiar lines of disapproval. I'm ordering an immediate evacuation of all non-essential personnel. That includes you, Dr. Carter." Elias leaned forward, ignoring the pull of fresh synthetic skin across his healing wound. "Sir, with respect, we're on the verge of a diplomatic breakthrough. Queen Sayela has formally requested continued scientific exchange. After you spent hours alone with her during a crisis," the Admiral cut in. "Do you have any idea what's being said throughout the Galactic Alliance? The rumors spreading on both sides?" "Rumors don't concern me," Elias replied firmly. "Facts do. And the fact is, this earthquake has created an opportunity for genuine cooperation. Their citadel is damaged. We have engineering expertise that could help." Admiral Reeves's expression hardened. "The Evrian traditionalists are calling for your head, Doctor. They're saying you violated sacred protocols by touching the Queen, by treating her wounds. Meanwhile, hawks in our own government are suggesting you've been compromised, that 5 hours alone with an alien sovereign represents a security breach." Leona, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward. "Admiral, as xenopsychologist, I must emphasize the significance of Queen Sayela's request. In Evrian culture, asking for assistance is unprecedented. It represents a fundamental shift in—" "I'm aware of the cultural implications, Dr. Reeves interrupted. "But my priority is preventing an interstellar incident. The peace accord is hanging by a thread, which is precisely why we should strengthen connections, not sever them," Elias argued. "Evacuating now sends exactly the wrong message." The Admiral's hologram flickered as he leaned closer. "Dr. Carter, your dedication to science is commendable, but this situation has escalated beyond academic interest. We have intelligence suggesting militant factions on both sides are mobilizing. A human strike team is already en route to Thalassa, ostensibly to ensure your safety." Elias felt his blood run cold. "You can't be serious." "Deadly serious. And our intelligence suggests Evrian extremists are planning something similar. A team to protect their queen from foreign influence." Reeves's expression softened slightly. "This isn't your fault, Elias. But your actions, however well-intentioned, have become a catalyst." After the Admiral's transmission ended, silence hung heavy in the communication center. Elias stared at the blank projection space, mind racing through implications and possibilities. "Well," Leona said finally, "that could have gone better." Lieutenant Kara May, who had observed the exchange from near the door, stepped forward. "The Admiral's concerns are valid. The situation has become volatile." "Because people are choosing to make it volatile," Elias snapped, then immediately regretted his tone. "I'm sorry, Lieutenant. It's just frustrating to see politics derail scientific progress." "This was never just about science," Kara reminded him gently. "From the moment we established this outpost, we've been walking a political tightrope. And now I've bounced on it like a child," Elias sighed, "creating waves." "Actually," Leona adjusted her glasses thoughtfully, "you may have created an opportunity. The Queen requested continued exchange. That's unprecedented." "An opportunity we're being ordered to abandon," Elias pointed out bitterly. Kara checked her tactical display. "The evacuation transport arrives in 18 hours. The Admiral's strike team in 36. She looked up, her expression unreadable. "That's our timeline." "Timeline for what?" Elias asked. "For whatever you're planning to do before we leave," she replied simply. "Because I know you, Dr. Carter, and you're not the type to just walk away." Elias studied her, surprised. "Are you encouraging insubordination, Lieutenant?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "I'm acknowledging reality. Just keep me informed so I can mitigate the diplomatic damage." After Kara departed, Leona turned to Elias with raised eyebrows. "Well, that was unexpected." "Indeed." He rubbed his temples, feeling the beginning of a headache. I need to speak with Queen Sayela before everything unravels. That won't be easy. Her council has likely isolated her, especially from human contact. Then, we'll need to be creative. Elias activated his datapad, pulling up schematics of the Citadel, or at least the portions they'd been permitted to map. There must be a way to establish communication without escalating tensions. As they strategized, neither noticed the shadow that passed briefly across the external sensors. A small, Evrian scout ship, flying low and fast toward the distant human settlement. Prince Darren found his mother in the Hall of Ancestors, standing before the scale wall, where generations of royal Evrians had placed a single scale upon their ascension to the throne. The hall had survived the earthquake intact, its ancient foundations reaching deep into Thalassa's bedrock. "The elders are demanding answers," he said without preamble, his scales shifting anxiously between green and yellow. "Traditionalists are calling for the humans to be expelled from our world entirely." Queen Sayela didn't turn. "And what do you think, my son?" The question caught him off guard. "My opinion is irrelevant. I am not yet queen." "No, but you will be one day." Now she faced him, her golden eyes searching his. "And you must decide what kind of ruler you wish to become, one who preserves tradition at all costs, or one who allows wisdom to evolve." Darren's scales darkened with emotion. "These humans, they're the same species that created weapons specifically to make our scales fall and never regrow. The same ones who bombed the eastern provinces into glass. How can you speak of evolution when they've shown only capacity for destruction?" "The human who helped me showed something different," she replied quietly. "Compassion without agenda, curiosity without exploitation." "One exceptional case doesn't redeem a species," Darren countered. "Nor does history condemn it eternally." She touched her son's face gently. "I lived through the war too, Darren. I saw the atrocities on both sides. What purpose does eternal enmity serve?" Before he could respond, a royal guard entered with a deep bow. "Your Majesty, forgive the interruption. We've received reports of unusual movement at the human outpost. Their transport vessels are preparing for departure." Queen Sayela's scales flashed with surprise. "They're leaving?" "It appears so. Intelligence suggests a full evacuation." She turned away, moving toward the ancient window that overlooked the distant human structures. Even at this distance, the increased activity was visible. Shuttles landing, equipment being loaded. "They were ordered to withdraw," she said softly, realization dawning. "Because of what happened during the earthquake." Darren moved to her side. "Isn't this what you want? What our people want? The humans gone from our world?" "Is it?" She turned to face him. "We've spent 3 cycles watching them, restricting their movements, limiting their knowledge, all while benefiting from the technology and resources their presence brings. The medical supplies that heal our young, the atmospheric processors that have begun repairing the war damage. We managed before they came," Darren insisted. "We can manage again." "Manage? Yes. Thrive? Progress." She shook her head. "There is a difference." The guard cleared his throat. "There is. More, Your Majesty. Our deep space sensors have detected an approaching vessel. Military-grade stealth technology, not registered with the peace accord monitors." Queen Sayela's expression hardened. "Human reinforcements?" "We believe so. Trajectory and speed suggest they will arrive within 2 diurnal cycles." She turned to Darren, decision crystallizing. "Prepare my personal transport, minimal security detail." "Mother, you cannot be serious." Darren's scales flashed with alarm. "If you're suggesting visiting the human outpost—" "I must speak with Dr. Carter before he departs," she said firmly. "This situation is spiraling toward conflict. I will not stand idle while peace unravels over misunderstanding and fear. The Council will never approve." "I am not asking the Council." Her scales shifted to the deep royal blue that signified absolute authority. "I am Queen. While I value advice, I do not require permission. Darren recognized the futility of argument when his mother displayed such determination. At least allow a full security contingent. The royal guards would send precisely the wrong message. She softened her tone. A small detail only. This is diplomacy, not invasion. As preparations began, neither the Queen nor the Prince was aware that elsewhere in the Citadel, a group of elite Evrian warriors was making preparations of their own, planning an unsanctioned mission to protect their sovereign from perceived human manipulation, by any means necessary. Elias stood in the shadow of a massive boulder, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. The rendezvous point, a neutral location between the human outpost and Evrian citadel, had been chosen for its obscurity and natural shielding from surveillance. The message requesting this meeting had arrived through unconventional channels. A small, Evrian data crystal, delivered by one of the few local workers permitted at the outpost. He checked his chronometer again. If the Queen didn't arrive soon, he would need to return to the outpost before his absence was noted. With evacuation preparations in full swing, security protocols had tightened considerably. A soft whisper of displaced sand alerted him moments before a slender figure appeared around the boulder's edge. Queen Sayela wore simple attire, a marked departure from her ceremonial regalia, with a hooded cloak partially concealing her distinctive royal crest. "Your Majesty," Elias bowed slightly. "Thank you for coming." "Dr. Carter," she inclined her head. "Your message suggested urgency." "Yes." He gestured to a flat rock, offering her a seat, but she remained standing. "I've been ordered to evacuate Thalassa, along with the entire research team. We depart tomorrow." Her scales darkened slightly. Disappointment, perhaps. "I suspected as much when I observed the transport preparations. Your superiors fear political complications. With good reason. Unfortunately." He met her gaze directly. "We've received intelligence that a human military team is en route to Thalassa, unauthorized, outside proper channels." Her four eyes widened. "For what purpose?" "Officially, to ensure the safety of human personnel?" His expression conveyed his skepticism. "Unofficially, they represent factions who view any Evrian human cooperation with suspicion. They're coming to rescue me." "Rescue." The word carried harmonic undertones of irony. "I have similar news. Doctor, a group of Evrian traditionalists has dispatched assassins to protect me from foreign influence. They believe I have been compromised." The implications hung between them, both sides racing toward conflict, each convinced they were preventing one. "History repeating itself," Elias said quietly. "The same fear and mistrust that sparked the original war." "Unless we intervene." Queen Sayela's scales shifted purposefully, taking on a more vibrant hue. "I came here not merely to receive information, Dr. Carter, but to propose a solution. I'm listening. A public demonstration of cooperation, not hidden away in private chambers that feed suspicion, but openly, before witnesses from both sides." She stepped closer. "Tomorrow, as the light rises, I will come to your outpost with a formal delegation. We will establish a joint commission, scientific and cultural exchange without the restrictions that have limited progress." Elias frowned. "With respect, Your Majesty, such a gesture might accelerate conflict rather than prevent it. The traditionalists on your side, the hawks on mine." "We'll see what we show them," she interrupted. "If we act from fear, hiding our cooperation, they control the narrative. If we act boldly, publicly, we may yet shift the course." "It's risky," he cautioned. "Once the military team arrives, then we must move quickly." Her determination was palpable. "The question, Dr. Carter, is whether you are willing to risk your career and standing for this chance." He didn't hesitate. "Of course. Science has always been my priority, not politics. No, she corrected gently. Not science alone. Understanding. Connection. I observed you during the earthquake. Your instinct was not to document, but to help. There is a difference. The observation struck closer to truth than he cared to admit. Whatever my motivations, I agree with your proposal, but we'll need to convince others on both sides. Leave the Evrians to me, she said. My son disagrees, but he will support my decision publicly. Prince Darren understands duty, if not yet wisdom. And I'll speak with Lieutenant May, Elias nodded. She's more sympathetic than she appears. As they finalized details, the setting sun cast long shadows across the desert. Neither could have predicted how their carefully laid plans would unravel within hours, or how the confrontation they sought to prevent would instead become the catalyst for unprecedented change. The evacuation transport arrived earlier than scheduled, throwing the outpost into accelerated preparations. Elias moved through organized chaos, helping secure research materials while simultaneously trying to persuade key personnel to support the Queen's proposal. You want us to what? Dr. Abernathy stared at him incredulously. Delay evacuation for a ceremonial handshake with the Avrians? After we've been explicitly ordered to withdraw? It's more than a ceremony, Elias insisted. It's a chance to establish a foundation for genuine cooperation, something we've been attempting for 3 years without success. And jeopardize our careers in the process, Leona added, though her tone suggested she wasn't entirely opposed. Admiral Reeves was quite clear. The Admiral is responding to political pressure, not scientific imperative. Elias lowered his voice as a group of security personnel passed by. This may be our only opportunity to prevent history from repeating itself. Lieutenant Kara May, who had been silently monitoring the conversation, finally spoke. The incoming vessel has increased speed. New arrival estimate, Euro 600 tomorrow. She met Elias's gaze. Before your scheduled meeting with the Queen. Then we adjust, he replied immediately. Move the meeting earlier. Dr. Carter, Kara's voice held warning. I've stretched my interpretation of orders to allow your communication with the Avrians, but actively delaying a mandated evacuation would give us time to secure peace, he finished. Isn't that the ultimate mission? The reason this outpost exists at all? Before she could respond, alarms blared throughout the facility. Red emergency lights bathed the corridor as the outpost's AI announced, Perimeter breach detected. Unknown entities approaching from Eastern Quadrant. All personnel to secure positions. Kara's tactical display illuminated with warning indicators. Multiple contacts. Moving fast, using terrain for cover. Her expression hardened. Avrian biosignatures. The Queen wouldn't attack, Elias said immediately. This must be the traditionalist faction she warned about. Regardless of who they are, protocol is clear. Kara drew her sidearm. Dr. Carter, get to the central hub with the other civilians. We'll handle this. No. He stood his ground. If these are Evrian extremists, escalating to armed confrontation plays directly into their hands. Let me communicate with them. Absolutely not, Kara snapped. I'm not sending an unarmed civilian. I'm going with or without permission, Lieutenant, Elias interrupted. The only question is whether I have your cooperation or opposition. For a tense moment, they locked eyes. Then Kara gave a curt nod. Wear a tactical vest. Stay on comms. At the first sign of aggression, you withdraw. Understood. Understood. Minutes later. Elias stood at the outpost's eastern entrance, the reinforced doors sliding open to reveal the red landscape of Thalassa, bathed in pre-dawn light. Through his earpiece, he could hear Kara positioning security teams on the perimeter, ready to intervene if necessary. The approaching Evrians materialized from the shadows of dunes, a dozen warriors in traditional battle armor. Their scales darkened to camouflage colors. They moved with predatory grace, weapons visible but not yet raised. Elias stepped forward, hands empty and visible. "I am Dr. Elias Carter. I request dialogue before conflict." The lead warrior, distinguished by elaborate markings on his armor, halted several meters away. "Human, you will surrender yourself for judgment. You have violated sacred protocols and influenced our queen improperly." "I've done neither," Elias replied calmly. "Queen Sayela and I acted in mutual aid during a natural disaster. Any other interpretation is politically motivated." A ripple of color passed through the warrior's scales. Anger. "You dare speak her name? You dare presume to know her mind?" "I presume nothing." Elias kept his voice steady. "I suggest we contact the Queen directly to resolve this misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding." The warrior's hand moved to his weapon. "The Queen has been isolated for purification rituals. She will be cleansed of foreign influence." The implications chilled Elias. "You've detained your own sovereign, against her will?" "For her protection," another warrior interjected, "until she regains clear judgment." Elias carefully touched his communicator. "Kara, are you hearing this?" "Every word," came the tense reply. "Situation deteriorating. Suggest immediate withdrawal." Instead, Elias took another step forward. "The Queen planned to come here today, to establish formal cooperation between our peoples. Is that why you've detained her? To prevent peace?" The lead warrior's scales flashed dangerously. "Peace built on submission is no peace at all. We remember the war, human. We remember your weapons that made our scales fall and never regrow. The Queen's injury stands as eternal reminder of human treachery." "Yet she chose healing over hatred," Elias countered. "Isn't that true strength? True leadership?" Before the warrior could respond, new alarms sounded from the outpost. Kara's voice came urgently through the communicator. "Multiple new contacts approaching from the west. Ivrian signatures." Elias turned to see another group emerging from the opposite direction. An ornate transport flanked by royal guards in ceremonial armor. At their center walked Queen Sayela, her scales gleaming royal blue in the rising sun. Prince Darren at her side. The traditionalist warriors reacted with obvious shock, some dropping to one knee in deference while others maintained aggressive postures. "Stand down, Commander Varric." The Queen's voice carried across the sand with harmonic authority. "You act without sanction or honor." The lead warrior, Varric, straightened defiantly. "My Queen, we act to protect you from yourself. This human has clouded your judgment. You presume to know my mind better than I?" Her scales flashed dangerously. "You who swore oaths to serve the crown, yet conspire to undermine it?" Prince Darren stepped forward. His own scales darkened with anger. "Your actions border on treason, Varric, detaining royal attendants, spreading falsehoods about the Queen's condition." Tension crackled in the air as the two Evrian factions faced each other, with Elias caught between. Through his earpiece, he could hear Kara mobilizing security teams, preparing for potential conflict. "Wait," he said into his communicator. "Don't intervene unless absolutely necessary." The standoff might have erupted into violence then. But a new sound split the dawn, the roar of engines as a sleek military transport descended from the clouds, bearing Alliance insignia. It settled on the outpost's landing pad, disgorging armed soldiers in tactical gear who quickly formed a perimeter. "Perfect timing," Elias muttered grimly. "All the volatile elements in one place." The human strike team advanced, weapons at ready. Their commander, a stern-faced woman with colonel's insignia, approached with purposeful strides. "Dr. Elias Carter," she called. "I'm Colonel Harper, Alliance Special Operations. We're here to extract you and all human personnel immediately." "That won't be necessary, Colonel," Elias replied, not moving from his position between the Evrian factions. "The situation is under control." Harper's eyes narrowed as she assessed the scene. Armed Evrians on either side, the Queen herself present. "This doesn't look under control to me, Doctor. It looks like you're being detained between hostile forces. The only hostility here is what we bring ourselves," he countered. Queen Sayela came in peace, to establish formal cooperation. "After spending hours alone with you during a crisis," Harper noted skeptically, "our intelligence suggests possible alien influence or coercion." The accusation hung in the air, absurd, yet dangerous. Before Elias could respond, Queen Sayela stepped forward, her regal bearing commanding attention from humans and Evrians alike. "If I wish to harm or manipulate Dr. Carter," she said, her translator rendering her harmonics into crisp, standard English, "I had ample opportunity during our time in the sanctum. Instead, we treated each other's wounds and shared knowledge." "With respect, Your Majesty," Harper replied stiffly, "human Avrian history suggests caution is warranted. The peace accord clearly establishes protocols for interaction, protocols that appear to have been violated." "The accord was meant to build trust, not prevent it," Elias interjected. "Sometimes progress requires moving beyond rigid frameworks." Tension mounted as more security personnel from both sides arrived. What had begun as a potential diplomatic breakthrough was rapidly deteriorating into an armed standoff. The slightest provocation could trigger conflict. "All of you," Queen Sayela's voice cut through the growing murmurs. "Follow me." Without waiting for response, she turned and began walking toward the towering citadel, visible in the distance. Prince Darren hesitated only briefly before falling into step beside her. After a moment's uncertainty, Elias followed as well. "Dr. Carter," Colonel Harper called sharply, "I order you to remain with Alliance personnel." He paused, looking back at the assembled humans, scientists and soldiers alike, watching with expressions ranging from confusion to concern. "This is our purpose here, Colonel, to build bridges, not walls. I suggest you come along and witness what's possible when we set aside fear." With that, he turned and continued after the Queen, aware that his career likely ended with that act of defiance. To his surprise, he heard footsteps behind him, Leona and several other scientists, followed reluctantly by Lieutenant Kara and a small security detail. "This is against my better judgment," Kara muttered as she caught up to him. "Noted," Elias replied with a faint smile. "But the right choice, I think." The procession grew as they traversed the Red Desert. Avrian traditionalists and royalists, human scientists and soldiers, all following the purposeful figure of Queen Sayela. The citadel loomed larger as they approached, its ancient spires catching the light of the rising sun. "Where is she leading us?" Colonel Harper demanded, having joined the march despite her obvious misgivings. "The Hall of Echoes," Prince Darren answered, surprising them with his perfect command of English, without a translator. "The most sacred chamber in our citadel, where generations have resolved conflicts through truth-speaking." "Truth-speaking?" Harper's skepticism remained evident. "A ritual space where falsehood brings pain," Darren explained. "Not through mysticism, but through architecture and acoustics. Lies create dissonant harmonics that Evrian auditory systems find uncomfortable." They entered the citadel through massive gates that swung open at the Queen's approach. The damage from the earthquake was evident. Cracked walls, fallen statuary, teams of Evrians working on repairs. Yet the structural integrity held, testament to the ancient builder's skill. Through winding corridors and grand halls they proceeded, until finally entering a vast circular chamber with a domed ceiling. Unlike most Evrian architecture, this room was stark, almost austere, its walls perfectly smooth, its floor a single piece of polished stone that reflected like water. Queen Sayela took position at the chamber's center, motioning for the others to form a circle around her. The acoustics became immediately apparent. Even whispered conversations from across the room carried with perfect clarity. "For thousands of cycles," she began, her voice resonating throughout the hall, Avrians have come to this chamber to speak truth, too difficult to voice elsewhere. The Hall of Echoes returns our words to us, stripped of deception. She turned slowly, addressing all assembled. Today, we face a choice between continued suspicion or a new beginning. Commander Varric stepped forward, his scales darkened with emotion. My queen, with deepest respect, the humans cannot be trusted. Their history is precisely that, she interrupted. History, as is ours. Both sides committed atrocities in the war. Both sides have reason for caution. But caution need not mean isolation. Colonel Harper moved forward as well. Your Majesty, the Alliance appreciates your progressive stance. But established protocols exist for a reason. Dr. Carter's unauthorized interactions saved my life, the Queen finished, and perhaps much more. With deliberate movements, she reached to her side where the damaged scales remained visible. Before the assembled crowd, she carefully loosened one, a process that clearly caused pain, though her expression remained neutral, and held it up for all to see. The scale, once iridescent, was dull and lifeless in her hand. This is the legacy of our conflict, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the hall. A weapon designed to make our kind vulnerable, to strip away our natural protection. When Dr. Carter treated my wounds, he asked me a simple question. He asked if these damaged scales hurt. She turned to face Elias directly. No one had asked before. Not my advisors, not my healers, not even my son. All avoided acknowledging imperfection, as our traditions demand. Her scales rippled with emotion. Dr. Carter saw not weakness, but a being in pain. He reached across the divide between our species and offered compassion without agenda. The hall fell silent as she approached Elias, standing before him with the damaged scale still held in her open palm. Does it hurt? He asked again, softly. Her scales flushed with color, the Evrian equivalent of a blush, visible to all assembled. Only when you stare like that, she replied, her voice carrying the same vulnerable honesty as when they'd been alone. The moment hung between them, witnessed by the gathered representatives of both worlds. Then, to the visible shock of the Evrians, Elias gently reached out and took the Queen's hand. Not the damaged scale, but her hand itself. Gasps echoed through the chamber. Such physical contact between species, especially with the sovereign, violated every protocol. Yet the Queen did not pull away. Instead, she turned to face the assembled crowd, their joined hands visible to all. This, she declared, is the future I choose for our peoples. Not fear disguised as caution, not isolation justified by history, but connection, understanding, the courage to reach across differences. For a moment, the Hall of Echoes lived up to its name, as murmurs bounced from wall to wall. Then, to everyone's surprise, Prince Darren stepped forward and placed his hand atop his mother's and Elias's. The future Queen speaks wisdom, he said, his scales shifting to a determined green. I stand with her choice. The symbolism was unmistakable. The current ruler and future sovereign united in purpose. One by one, others joined them, Leona stepping forward from the human side, a senior royal advisor from the Evrian. The circle widened as scientists, soldiers, and even some traditionalists moved to join, until only the most hardened remained apart. Commander Varric watched, his scales conflicted colors. My queen, this changes generations of tradition. Tradition should preserve wisdom, Commander, not prevent its evolution, she replied gently. Join us, not in surrender, but in strength. After a long moment, his scales settled into resignation, and he too stepped forward. Colonel Harper remained skeptical, but even she recognized the historic significance unfolding. Admiral Reeves will have questions, she muttered to Kara. Let him question, Kara replied simply. Some moments transcend orders. As the impromptu ceremony concluded, practical matters quickly took precedence. The Queen established a joint crisis response team to address earthquake damage, leveraging human engineering expertise and Evrian knowledge of the Citadel's structure. Scientists from both sides began comparing notes on seismic patterns, working to predict potential aftershocks. What might have erupted into conflict instead transformed into cooperation. The military transport that had arrived as a rescue mission was repurposed to deliver supplies and equipment. The traditionalist warriors who had come to protect their queen instead found themselves assigned to joint security details, working alongside human counterparts. Not everyone embraced the new paradigm. Some humans requested transfer off-world. Some Evrians retreated to isolated enclaves. But enough remained, committed to building something new, that the initiative took root and began to grow. 6 months later, Elias stood at the entrance to the newly established Thalassan Institute of Xenocultural Studies, watching as the first class of students arrived. The institute occupied a restored wing of the ancient citadel, its architecture a deliberate blend of human and Evrian design elements. Nervous, Leona appeared beside him, datapad in hand. First day of classes. Terrified, he admitted with a smile. Teaching is outside my comfort zone. Says the man who took the hand of an alien queen in front of 2 hostile armies. That was different. That was instinct, she finished for him. Just like this will be. Trust yourself. Inside the main hall, human and Evrian students were already mingling, awkwardly at first. Then, with increasing animation as initial barriers fell away. Many of the humans were children of outpost personnel who had opted to remain on Thalassa. The Evrians came primarily from progressive families who saw opportunity in the cultural exchange. Queen Sayela entered from a side chamber, her arrival causing a ripple of deference among the Evrian youth. In the months since the Hall of Echoes gathering, her political position had strengthened rather than weakened. By embracing change openly rather than reluctantly, she had transformed potential scandal into historic leadership. Dr. Carter, she greeted, her translator now rarely necessary as her English had improved significantly. Are the facilities adequate for your needs? More than adequate. Your Majesty, they're exceptional. His gaze moved to the damaged scales along her side, still visible, no longer hidden by ceremonial attire. Like the building itself, they had become a symbol of transformation rather than shame. She followed his glance and her scales rippled with amusement. Still staring, Doctor? Professional interest, he replied with a smile, their private joke now a comfortable shorthand between colleagues. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a young Evrian girl, no more than 8 Earth years by equivalent development. She approached hesitantly, her scales shifting through nervous colors. Excuse me, she said in careful English. Are you the human doctor who helped our queen? Elias knelt to her level. One of many humans working with your people now. Yes. The child reached out one small hand. May I touch? We learned humans have no scales. Is it true? The request, innocent yet profound, caught him off guard. He glanced at the queen, who nodded encouragement. Of course, he said, offering his hand. The child's 3 fingers gently explored his skin, her eyes wide with wonder. It's so soft. How do you protect yourself? We manage, he replied, smiling. Different adaptations for different worlds. Across the hall, a human boy was having a similar interaction with an elderly Evrian teacher, tentatively touching the iridescent scales on the teacher's arm while asking questions that made both species laugh. Queen Sayela watched these exchanges with evident satisfaction. This is what I envisioned. Not mere tolerance, but curiosity. Wonder. She turned to Elias. The peace accord gave us absence of conflict. What grows here is something more profound. Understanding, he suggested. Connection, she corrected gently. The recognition that differences need not divide. As classes began, and students moved to various chambers, Elias found himself standing with the Queen in the newly restored Hall of Echoes. The room that had once hosted a tense confrontation now served as the Institute's main lecture hall, its perfect acoustics ideal for teaching. "Do you ever wonder," she asked quietly, "what might have happened if the earthquake hadn't forced us together that day?" Sometimes. He considered the question carefully. But I prefer to think it was inevitable. Not the crisis, but the connection. Once we stopped hiding behind protocols and started asking real questions. Like whether my scales hurt, she said, her voice carrying a hint of the vulnerability she'd shown that day. Exactly, he smiled. The simplest questions often matter most. Outside, the copper sun of Thalassa 9 painted the desert in shades of amber and gold. Inside, two species took tentative steps toward a shared future, not through grand treaties or political maneuvering, but through simple moments of genuine connection. And in the Hall of Echoes, where truth could not hide, a human scientist and an alien queen continued the conversation that had changed two worlds.